Hey everyone, welcome to my C# coding tutorial. This tutorial is supposed to be a beginner's tutorial, and it's more of a crash course as to everything you would learn inside of like a grade 11 intro to computer science class. So if you guys don't know anything about or very little basics of C# or really any coding language, then this tutorial is for you. So to start off, what we need to do is first of all, go ahead and install the .NET framework. So .NET is a framework that allows us to make C# code and execute it. To do this, head on over to .NET.microsoft.com. Alright, click on the downloads button here. And over here, you're going to get two options, .NET Core 3.1 and .NET 5.0. So obviously this one's the newer version. Alright, and that's the one that I use personally. Alright, and you're just going to want to install that SDK, and then you're going to be good to go. Now, some more interesting stuff about .NET is that .NET is cross-platform similar to its Java counterpart. You can make web apps, mobile apps, desktop apps. In fact, here's one of my mobile apps. Now, you guys might be thinking that I might have a C# backend, but my backend is actually in Python. My front end is in C#. That's right, I'm not using JavaScript. Instead, I'm using pure C#, mainly because JavaScript's like the worst language on the planet. But this goes to show the caliber that C# has. Not many people like C#, but it's arguably one of the best languages there is. So now that you're done installing it, all that you need to do is just head on over to your terminal, alright? And what you're going to want to do is just go ahead and type .NET like that. And if you can see stuff like this and you don't see any sorts of errors, then that means that you've installed it correctly. Now we're going to start the coding aspect of this video. Alright, so in order to start coding, you're going to have to first of all go ahead and make a folder. So mine's just called C# tutorial. Inside of this folder, what you will want to do is just go .NET new console. So now what this tells .NET is to create a new a new project that's a console app. So console apps basically interact with the terminal. So you're just going to want to click that. Alright, and now it's creating stuff. Alright, now that that's created, you're going to want to do is just head on over to program.cs. All the other files are just config files that we're not going to get into because, well, there's not really anything you can do in them. In fact, I would argue don't touch them at all. Okay, so inside of here we get a namespace and a class, and we get a main function. We're going to go over functions a bit more later, but all you need to know is that if your function is main, that's the one that's going to run first. Alright, now to run this app, what we're going to want to do is just type .NET run. And it's going to go ahead and print out hello world. Okay? Alright, now that our setup's done, the first thing we're going to want to do is go ahead and learn about variables. Now, a variable is just anything that's going to store data. And it's going to store one data, for example, an age, a name, a true or false statement, okay? So there are several different types of variables. There is integers, which are for numbers, doubles, which are decimal numbers, so like 55.5. Then there is strings, which are just text, so it could be alphanumeric. And there is booleans, which is just true or false. We're going to use booleans a bit more in the next part of the video. Alright, so to create any sort of variable, you're going to first of all specify the type, like int. Then you're going to specify the name of the variable, like age. Then you're going to set it equal to a certain value, like 50 for example. You could also not set it to any value, but then its value by default is null. Now, some people like to do this, but it's not really the most ideal idea, because sometimes what happens is that if your values are null, and it calls upon that value, it could lead to your entire computer crashing. Okay? And now that we have our age, right, we can just take this age and we can go ahead and take it and we can just print it out. So we're just going to go console.writeLine, and we're just going to print out the age. Now if I were to just run that, I would get 50. Alright, similarly, we can also create a decimal. So to do this, just type decimal, okay, and I don't know, let's just call this decimal underscore num, and set that equal to 55.50. Now, a decimal number is not the same as an integer. Alright, it's completely different. Alright, But what you guys can do, oh wait, not a decimal, sorry. It's called a double. Yeah. A double is completely different from an integer. However, because they're both numbers, you can intertwine them together. For example, you can add an integer to a decimal. So to do this, you would just take decimal is equal to decimal num plus the h. So what you're doing is you're taking this variable decimal and you're setting it equal to the original value of decimal, which is just 55.5, and then you're adding over the age that was originally there. Now, when I'm going to print this out, it's going to be decimal null, decimal underscore num. Okay, now let's just go ahead and run that. So as you can see, we get 105.5. That's because what we've done is we've added the age value over to decimal. Now the next thing we're going to learn about is called strings. So as I said earlier, strings are just alphanumerical text. So to make a string, we just write string, and we just write like the variable name, which is text, right? And inside of here, what we're going to want to do is have two quotation marks. This tells the compiler that there is an actual string. All right, and I can type anything I want: numbers, letters, words, everything. I can even put an emoji, I'm pretty sure. All right, and if I were to just go ahead and print that, console.writeLine text, and run. Yeah, as you can see, we get the emoji, we get everything in there. So that's how texts work. Now the next thing we're going to do is just explore booleans. So to make a boolean, you just type bool, and then you just write like status, because what a boolean is just a true or false statement. Booleans are mainly used when you don't really want a lot of information and you just need to know whether or not something should run or shouldn't run. So like, let's just set the boolean status to false, and then we can just go ahead and print that out, and we will obviously just get false. Okay, and .NET run. There, we get false. So that's how variables work in a nutshell. All right, now you might be wondering, hey Yasa, what if I want to take two variables like a string and an integer and add them together? Now, some of you may not have already thought of this, but it is in fact possible. Just like how you can add a double with an integer, you can add an integer to a string. However, the thing is, what you need to do is convert it. All right, think of it like apples and oranges, right? You can't add apples with oranges. What you're going to want to do is convert it. Or think of it like currencies. Let's suppose that integers are American currency, and think of doubles as Canadian currency, which can be intertwined with one another. But think of strings as like some, I don't know, like Chinese currency. All right, you can't, intertwine with that. All right, so first we're going to explore how to convert integer to a string. So first of all, let's make a variable called age and set that equal to your age. Okay, now the next thing we're going to want to do is just go ahead and make a string. All right, now the string is just going to be our sentence, right? And the sentence is just going to be my age is, like that. Okay, now the next thing you need to do is go ahead and convert this integer into a string. So I'm going to make a new string, and it's just going to be called string age, and it's just going to be equal to age dot to string, like that. Now I can just go ahead and print that out. I can just go sentence plus age. And now, let me just clear this out. And if I were to run this, what we're going to get is my age is 16. Now, just like how I can convert from age to string, I can also convert a string to an age. Now, one thing to keep in mind, however, is that when you convert from a string to an integer, the string has to only have numerical values. Otherwise, it's just going to turn into a huge error. All right? So like this. The hell? Int age is equal to 21. All right? And then, what's it called? Let's convert this, or wait. string age is equal to 21. Then what we do is we're just going to go int underscore age and set that equal to age. Or no, we're going to want to do is we're going to want to parse the string value. We're going to go int 32. All right. We can also go int 16, but usually int 32 is the best. All right. And you can also go int 34, but those are for really huge numbers. We're going to go int 32 dot parse, and we're going to go ahead and parse the age value. Now we can just go ahead and print this out. Dot right line. And to show that this is a number, I'm going to go ahead and divide this by 7. And that's also going to show your age in dog years. I think that's how it works. I'm not entirely sure. All right. And now it's going to go ahead and it's going to print 3. Right? So just by showing you guys that it divides, that shows that it's an integer. All right. Now the next thing we're going to want to do is go ahead and learn about loops. Now, a loop is pretty self-explanatory. It runs in a loop, meaning it just runs over and over again for a loop of time. Now, there's 2 types of loops. There is a for loop and a while loop. Let's go with while loops first. So a while loop will continuously run until a certain condition is met. So for example, let's make a while loop over here, right? Let's first make an integer called 0, all right? And I'm going to make a while loop. So while the time, like the variable time, times, right? While the variable times is unequal to, so to make an unequal sign, all we have to do is we have to make an exclamation mark and equal to symbol is equal to 5. All I'm going to do over here is I'm just going to go ahead and print out dot right line in a loop. And over here what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and, actually let's just run this right now. So when I run this, okay, as you can see it's just constantly running over and over again until your memory will just eventually die. Or not die, but just get used up. The reason why it's continuously running is because this statement has never been proven false. Alright, a while loop will continuously run until the statement is false. Alright, so currently times is unequal to 5, that is true. So not until time is equal to 5, and it will be a false statement, will it stop running. To do this, all I'm going to do is I'm just going to go times plus 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 plus. So all this does is add 1. Right, so if I were to just clear it, and a .NET run, now it just runs 5 times, and boom, that's it. That's how while loops work. Now, the way a for loop works is also based off conditions, but it's more oriented towards running in a certain amount of time. All right, it's run for a specific amount of time that's verified, that's told by a variable. Like for example, let's take times, okay, and let's just set that equal to 5, for example, right? Now to make a for loop, we're going to go for, okay? And make sure to have a set of regular brackets and then a set of curly braces. So inside of the curly braces, you're just going to write your code. And same with the while loop, however, you guys can write whatever code you want inside of here. It doesn't really matter, okay? But just do know that each time the loop is finished, your values are going to reset unless if they're outside of the for loop. So inside of the for loop, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make an integer, call it I, and I'm going to set that equal to 0, okay? So all I've just done is make a variable called I, and that's an integer and the value is 0. Then what I do is I put a semicolon, and then I go I is greater than 5, okay? So while this condition is also true, all I want is for I's value to increment by 1, okay? And then I'm just going to print that out. Right line in a loop. Okay, so let me just explain this a bit better. We made an integer called I. Then what we've done is we've compared the value of I to the value of 5. And actually, let's just compare that to the value of times. There we go. So the variable times is equal to 5, right? Now what happens is that since I is not greater than times, it's just going to keep on running. All right? And it's going to keep on running, and the value of I will increment until this statement is, as a result, not true. And since it's not true, it's going to be false, and it's just not going to run. So we're going to go .NET run, okay? And it's just in a loop, right? So as you can see, for loops and while loops, they basically do the exact same thing, all right? Personally, there's no right or wrong loop to use. It's just mainly in terms of conditions, we use while loops, and in terms of like a specific amount of time run, we use for loops. All right, certain languages like Go, they don't even have while loops in there. They just use for loops for everything. All right, now the next thing we're going to want to learn is if or else statements. Oftentimes when you write your code, you need to know whether or not your code should run or not. All right, so this is why if statements come. If statements will decide whether or not a certain code chunk should run if the statement that is specified is true. And if it's not true, then it's not going to run. All right, for example, let's suppose if my age is what's my age? 16, right? Now, if the age, all right, is greater than or equal to 18, I will go ahead and print out you are an adult. Okay? Now, if I were to just run this, right? Yeah, see, it doesn't run. The reason why it doesn't run is because it's inside of this code is inside of an if statement, and this statement is false, right? Because age is not greater than or equal to 18. All right? Now, had my age been 18, for example, it's going to print you are an adult. All right? Now, going back to the age 16, right? Sometimes what we want is to just go ahead and see, or what we want is another statement that if the first statement is not true, we can use this next statement so that way we can get some sort of value. This is called an else statement. So else statements, they don't have any conditions. All an else statement does is it's just the last option. Like if nothing else is true, this is what's going to happen. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and print out console.writeLine. You are a child. What's up? Oh, semicolon. Let's just clear that out. Okay, and it's just going to go ahead and print out you are a child. All right. Now that's what an else statement does. All right. Now let's suppose if you also want there to be another if statement related here. Okay. Now in order for that, we're going to have to use else if. So else if is a hybrid of the both. And the way else if works is it works after the if statement. Okay. It works after the if statement, and it's just another condition to check with. So for example, if age is equal to or if age is I don't know, greater than 16, then we can just print out you are almost an adult. All right. And now if we print this out, right? Also if age is greater than or equal to. There we go. Yeah, so it says you are almost an adult. Because what happens is it goes through the first statement and it checks, oh, this is not true. Then it's going to go to the second statement. It's like, oh, this statement is true. So it's going to go ahead and print this out. All right, and then it's just going to end the entire if statement because there's no need to check anymore. All right, even though there's an else statement here, it's not going to look at it. All right, and sometimes, however, you don't want to have an else if statement and you're going to want another if statement. You're going to want this if two situations are true. Although, if you want two or more situations to be true, you can use an and or an or statement, which is the next part of this video. All right, let's suppose if you want to check if one of many statements is true within an if statement, right? Or let's suppose if you want to have more than one conditional statement inside of your if statements. To do this, what you're going to want to use is an or statement or an and statement, okay? We're going to go over or statements first. An or statement is simply just to check to see if one of many conditions is true. All right, for example, let's suppose if your mom says, take out the trash or mow the lawn. If you do one of these, you're going to get $5, all right? And that's what an or statement is. It just checks to see if one of them is true, not if all of them are true. So to check to do this, what we're going to do is we're just going to go if take trash, and then we're going to make our or symbol. So to do an or symbol, just go shift and then just go forward slash. And it's going to give you these two straight lines. So if take trash or mow lawn, console.writeLine, you get $5. Okay, now let me just go ahead and clear this up a bit more for you guys. So an if statement will run if one statement is true. So since take trash is true, it's going to say you get $5. Boom, you get $5. All right. Now, similarly, if both statements are true, since it's just checking for one, it's still true, right? And however, if both statements are false, right, it's just not going to return anything because I don't have an else statement ready. All right. But had I written an else statement, it would have, done something. All right. Now, similarly, let's suppose if your mom goes ahead and says that you need to mow the lawn and take out the trash to get $5. Well, first of all, that's a horrible deal. But in order to do this, you're going to want to use an AND statement. AND statements check to see if every condition inside of an if statement is true. To make one, just type the AND symbol twice. And boom, that's how an AND statement works. So even if one of these are false, it's just not going to run. The last and final thing we're going to be exploring about is called functions/methods. And I even foreshadowed this earlier when I told you guys about it. So a function is simply just an amount of code that can run over and over again or be reused, all right? Think of it like a template, all right? Oftentimes when you write code, sometimes code is repeated. Now, we don't want the code to constantly be repeated because it leads to larger file sizes, and what happens is that if you need to change one part of the code, you often end up having to change lots of code. So instead, what we do is we write our code inside of a function, and then we specify certain values called an argument, and then we just write the code inside of there. We've actually already looked at a function called main. All right, so let me explain to you what main is, right? So what main does is it's the first function that's going to be run, all right? And it returns a void value. What void simply means is it returns nothing. Most functions return something, but if you want your function to not return anything, you're just going to write void. Some values that you can return include integers, strings, and booleans. All right, so really any data type. Okay, and inside of here, it takes the strings as an argument. So what that just means is it just takes like a set of strings. You guys don't really need to know about this right now, but yeah. Now, let's suppose if you want to make your own method. First thing you're going to want to do is type static, okay? And then what you're going to want to do is specify what type of value you want returned. So let's suppose if we want to make a function that adds two numbers, right? So we're going to type int, and what we're going to do is we're going to make the name of our function, which is add, okay? And then the next thing we want is for some arguments. To specify arguments, what you're going to want to do is just go ahead and specify the type of variable and what the variable is, like int num1 and int num2. And then we want to, so since we have an integer here, we want to return an integer value. So let's just return the sum of num1 plus num2. Oh yeah, and we need a semicolon. Okay, and now we can just use this, we can call upon this function. All right, so like int sum is equal to add, and we're gonna want to do is just we're gonna add 40 with 60, and let's just go ahead and print this out. All right, now let's just run that. So once we run it, as you can see, we got 100. So just to re-explain everything I did was I created a function called add. Add takes in two arguments, all right, called number1 and number2. These values are specified by a user, all right? So it takes in the values 40 and 60, okay? And then what it does is it returns these two values and then prints out the entire sum. So that's the end of my intro to Crash Course for C#, or whatever the hell I thought of the name at the start of the video. So obviously this doesn't, tell everything about C#, but this tells quite a bit. If you guys want to, see the website and all the code, it's going to be available right down in the description. All right, be sure to join our Discord server if you guys haven't already. Thank you guys for watching. Have a nice day.